Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TEACHERCAST Educational Network. My name is Jeff Bradbury. Thank you so much for joining me today and making TEACHERCAST your home for professional development. This is the latest in our series within the 95% group, talking all about the science of reading. And I'm thrilled today, once again, to have with me Miss Laura Stewart, the Chief Academic Officer for 95% Group. Laura, how are you today? Welcome back to TEACHERCAST.
You know what? I'm doing great. And thank you so much for having me back. It's just been such a great experience to have these episodes, these podcast episodes with you, Jeffrey. And so I just really appreciate this opportunity.
We have been having a great time on this series, talking all about the science of reading. For those who are picking this up for the first time, talk to us a little bit about our previous episodes and what is the science of reading all about?
The 95% Group is a leading provider of classroom resources and professional learning specifically focused on literacy and following this body of evidence that we call the science of reading. And that's exactly what the science of reading is. It's a body of research that helps to inform our practice. And so the series has really been speaking to leaders who have really been courageous change agents, leading voices, at both national and state and district levels. So it's really about how are we leading into the science of reading practices to better outcomes for students.
Now you can find all the information out about our other episodes, both audio and video, at teachercast.net/95% group. And Laura, today is going to be a fantastic episode. Talk to us a little bit about who you brought on the show with us today.
Well, I could not be more delighted today to welcome really two of my favorite people, Dr. Rob Friel and Dr. Brian Cromer. And Rob is the Assistant Superintendent, and Brian is the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment in Southwestern School District in Pennsylvania.
And we are looking forward to this show. If you would like to participate in all of our shows, you can head on over to teachercast.net/podcast. Hit that like and subscribe. And of course, all of the episodes are going to be over at teachercast.net/95% group. Laura, take it away.
All right. Thanks so much, Jeffrey. So before we launch into our discussion, I thought I would provide a little more background for our listeners. So before taking on their current positions, Brian Cromer, Ed.D., was a K-5 elementary principal for 16 years, eventually culminating in 2 years as both the elementary supervisor and building principal. Rob Friel, Ed.D., served as the Director of Curriculum before moving into his current role as Assistant Superintendent. And what's exciting is over these past 3 years, the team of elementary administrators and teachers in Southwestern School District have diligently focused on English language arts by building a literacy framework for curriculum development. They have identified core resources to support that framework. And they have really led large into literacy, as I like to say. They're courageous leaders. And we have featured Rob and Brian and their implementation journey in my book, The Courage to Lead. And in this book, we'll provide the link to the book in the show notes. In this book, I've had the pleasure, the honor of really featuring courageous leaders such as Brian and Rob. So I'm really thrilled for them to be joining us today to share that implementation journey and their words of wisdom and words of advice for all of us listening today. So Brian and Rob, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us. Pleasure to be here today.
Yes, thank you.
So nice to see you. So let's just start. So maybe we'll start with you, Rob. Tell us about Southwestern School District.
Sure, Laura. So Southwestern School District, we are a school district of approximately 4,500 students, and we are located in the south central part of Pennsylvania, right along the Maryland border. As a matter of fact, we are in York County. Our name comes from the southwest corner of York County. That's how that name came about. So we actually have 3 townships that make up, we have about 30,000 residents within those 3 townships that sort of make up Southwestern. We would be considered a suburban school district. We are as I like to think about it, a destination spot for educators. You know, we have a long history of pride in the successful accomplishments in athletics, in academics, in the arts. It's just a great place to go. Our motto is tradition of excellence, but we have a once a Mustang, always a Mustang. The Mustang is sort of the emblem of the district, if you will, and we sort of hold to that, and we really believe in that idea that once you're part of this community, you stay in this community. So there's a lot of tradition and pride, and I say that intentionally because it is definitely a part of our journey as we talk through how we have worked on the curriculum development and implementation side for literacy at the elementary.
What spurred you to implement a kind of what I would consider a transformational literacy change in your district?
Great question. So when we started this journey, it was right right before COVID had hit. So we were looking in the 2019-2020 school year was when we knew we wanted to tackle this. And as Rob came on earlier in his career as our first director of curriculum, we had worked through a number of other content areas, and we were at the point at the elementary level that we wanted to approach the literacy and everything that goes into that. One of the reasons that we knew it's very comprehensive, we wanted to tackle all of this. Well, that March of 2020 rolls around and sort of threw a little bit of a wrinkle in where we were heading. But we didn't just wait and hold on. We started to game plan, hoping that when we came back the next school year, we could start the process. So we knew early on, once we were in, we really wanted to look at research, look at what our current practices are, our current philosophy, what is out there, and what is new, what new research is out there. So we have one thing that Rob didn't mention. We do have 4 elementary schools. So within that, we have 4 elementary schools, and we really have had a system of trying to be consistent and making sure if we did something in those title buildings, we were also implementing programmatically in our other buildings. So we always felt that way. So one of the challenges was doing this extremely large task with 4 elementaries, starting in COVID, because even when we came back, we were hybrid, we were out for a little bit, we were in. So tackling all of that within this system. So that was one of the big challenges that we had.
Yeah. You know, what you mentioned about that consistency, I find that to be really important, especially in what you have described as kind of a close-knit community. You want to be able to assure your community that the students will have an equally high quality educational experience no matter what school they are in. So I applaud that.
Yeah, we definitely, we have a great community, and we have very active parents that want to be involved and they want to support. So we are fortunate with that. You know, you have some that, you're working on a little bit more than others, but we have a community that wants, they want what's best for their kids. They trust us. They buy in. So that's very nice in that part. And they talk to each other. So you definitely need to keep that in the back of your mind.
You chose an interesting time to start this transformational change, but I'm sure that ended up to be fortuitous, because as we were coming out of the pandemic and kids were coming back to school, did you find that your students were experiencing some challenges?
Coming back in, yes, there were definitely deficiencies that, were essentially natural. You can only do so much online or in a hybrid setting. We were an A-B schedule at one point, so you had half the students here one day, half the other, sort of bouncing back and forth. There's definitely going to be gaps that are built. There's no doubt about it. You're not going to get around that. Outside of the gaps that we were discovering pre-COVID. So we felt we had some gaps, which is why we knew we needed to be methodical when we tackled this topic. But then the gaps we created even more as we went through. So it definitely was a piece that we needed a team effort, and that's one thing that we've done. We had a variety of stakeholders involved in this process from all the buildings and the leadership team. And I do want to stress that the leadership team has to be a part of the process when you're going through this, because they are the direct supervisors. They are in there sort of in the trenches with the teachers. At the central office level, we're one entity, but we need to make sure as we build these pieces and we look at things, principals and assistant principals have an understanding of when they're going into support, talking about what they see and helping to move students through and move the teachers through a philosophical shift, because that's what it was.
Really, that was the impetus, is kind of a philosophical shift, like you said, looking at what the current research said and how do you make that mind shift, actually. So is that where you started, Rob? Maybe you want to talk about this. It sounds like maybe you started by thinking through, where are we now and where do we want to go? But also you started by building a leadership team. Are there other things that you would identify as kind of your starting points?
There are definitely some important layers underneath the readiness for the philosophy shift. And if I could talk about that readiness, one of the things when I came into the district in 2017 as the director of curriculum, one thing that was very clear early on is that the process for design in curriculum was seen just as they have to get it done in the summer and not seeing it as an integral part of instructional practice. So a framework that was used and cycles of development were all, I would say, haphazardly or lackadaisically used and followed. So in those first few years from 2017 until about COVID year, really it was a systematic approach, developing the systems and processes for bringing the organization, all of the teachers and the leaders in the organization, into an understanding that curriculum work is ongoing. And we are always looking to improve. We are always looking to design things. And so by the time we got to 2020 and we were ready to tackle the literacy at elementary, that was one of the final projects in kind of as I looked at all of the different things we were doing from a curriculum standpoint, we had already been building systems in place where we started to tackle key knowledge and skills of the discipline. We started to look at some vertical progression of that knowledge and skill using existing resources and standards and what was available in what was going on in the world in that content area. All of that came into play as we started to look. And so once we launched in 2020, looking at all of the foundations of literacy, what do we know about the way kids are learning to read? It became very clear we needed to build not just curriculum guides, but the entire philosophy, the literacy philosophy and framework. So the system was needed to support the entire approach of design. And then when we got to the literacy piece, it was then just a matter of working through and taking our time in building the knowledge and skill development, those progressions, and then allowing that team to sort of build the framework. Again, based on what was going on in the world, we knew that there was a big shift in literacy across the country. We were aware of that. We had our reading specialists and we had our teacher leaders and our building administrators involved in bringing that to the group so that we could then create this process and ultimately this curriculum framework so that we could then be where we are today.
So you developed kind of a design framework for development of any curriculum, regardless of the content area. Is that what I'm understanding? And then you overlay, for example, ELA or math or whatever it might be onto that design framework.
Exactly right.
You already put that into place. And by the way, tell us who was in your leadership team. Who made up your leadership team?
So it was different layers of people. Obviously, the central office team would include myself at the time. We had the assistant superintendent at the time who was involved in that. And then the role of the elementary supervisor that Brian was before he became the director of curriculum. And that was, I'm going to say that was sort of a core triad of the leadership team at central office. But then it also involved every building principal. It involved grade level leaders who had curricular or content-based responsibilities, grade level responsibilities. But Brian already said this earlier, one of the most important parts to this was that we didn't just limit it to a small group. We utilized our reading specialists as leadership, as part of the leadership team. We drew from all 4 buildings and pulled different grade level and special education leaders, IST leaders into discussions and being involved at different phases of the process. So part of our buy-in story was that we really tried to spread out all along the way at different points, different teams that were able to come in to work on specific tasks, to kind of build them up as leaders and giving them knowledge and expertise in working on a different component, like when we built the literacy framework, when we worked through that document and that guide, or when we started to do mapping of different units at grade levels, different people were involved. And so it sort of built out the expertise among different groups of people, and also then help them to think, hey, I have a part of this. I know what's going on. I'm aware of it. They get to be part of the decision-making process, again, to lead us to the implementation to where we are today.
That's so important what you say about, building in kind of an approach that automatically, ensures some buy-in and making sure that your teams are made up of people who have different skills and talents in different areas of leadership. That's one of the things we talk about in the Courage to Lead book. When you're thinking about the implementation journey, how are you bringing people into leadership roles? And how are you forming different teams, your implementation teams and your leadership team and your, grade level data teams and cross grade level data teams like that? That approach, I think, is just a really key foundational approach to any sort of implementation.
Right. And if I could when I just think about the different, like the practical of the different teams, we had a team that was generated to do the K-5 scope and sequence vertical alignment work. We had different people coming in to look at what are we doing with spelling K-5? What are we doing with writing K-5? What are we doing with fluency? What are we doing with phonics? What are we doing with comprehension skills, vocabulary? We looked at every one of those skill areas. We had different people at the table for each of those K-5 strands. Then when that project was done, then we started to talk about, well, let's look at the design teams. We had people coming in to think about the design work. What did we need to do research on? What do we need to bring? That group then led us into a summer where we were then able to say, okay, now that we have the design work done, we need a team to help us build and write the literacy framework. We had a team that did that for core resource exploration. We had a team that actually wrote for the different maps. So it really did shift because we had so many layered in stages of work, and people could come and go based on maybe their skill or their interest or their investment. And it really did expand a lot of opportunity to bring a lot of different people in along the way.
I love that. I think that's so important. So one of the things that you've done for us in the Courage to Lead book is you've really described your arc of implementation. So maybe, Brian, could you talk to us a little bit about some of those key milestones along that implementation journey?
Yeah, when we started with, we went through our core resources, core resource selection, wanted to implement 95 K-5. So this was definitely one of the things that when we were looking at science of reading, we really were starting to identify where we were weak, and we knew that we wanted a strong program K-5. 4th and 5th grade, very big learning curve for everyone, and we could certainly go into that side historically, where we're at, the phonics program at that level. There was a lot of professional learning for especially our 4th and 5th grade teachers as we went through, and our 3rd grade teachers. We were stronger at that area, naturally at the lower grades. But when we implemented, we had a pilot team. We had a number of people do pilot and give us back feedback when we were doing the resources. But when we came in to do our implementation that year 1, and if I just want to share, if we were counting years, this is year 5 from beginning to end. Just think about how when COVID started, you're going back that far, and I might be off a year because it does get a little blurry from the beginning, but it's really from that COVID time to now. We are just in our full implementation year. So again, kind of going back to, we had, excuse me, a number of professional learning opportunities through the company where we were able to go through in our system. We had our grade level meetings, we had building level meetings to have dialogue. We had vertical conversations. So we made sure that our K and 1 teachers were talking, 2 and 3, because I think that is a key piece that we can, and I think this is in general, probably, I'm sure there's other buildings, we're very good, or we have always been very good at horizontal collaboration, but we really were working on vertical collaboration. So within our PLC groups or our systems at each elementary, we were doing the vertical as best we could, had the horizontal collaboration each month, which would then build on that. One of the critical pieces, and I've shared this before, was when we had the coaching opportunities come in. When we had the individuals come in at each of our buildings, sit down with the teachers, go through, excuse me, that was in that November timeframe. It was at the perfect time because we were, and I trusted the process as far as the recommendation, but it ended up, it was a perfect time because teachers were working through the system, they had enough background knowledge other than receiving something prior to school to then make changes, even the next day, making changes. We happened to be in walkthroughs. I think Rob and I actually might have been together with an individual the next day. She came in after that coaching and talked to the kids. Oh, this is how we need to look at it this way. We may not have to do every single thing that I thought we needed to do on here. And it just kind of the timing got better and better as we went through. So those checkpoints and that collaboration was really critical in that implementation plan.
That's great. So what I'm hearing in terms of like kind of some key milestones to highlight here. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for reminding us how much that this takes time. For any sort of transformative, experience, you start with a vision and it takes time to realize that vision. So thank you for that. What a terrific episode that was. I mean, I have learned so much and I am so inspired by their words, their leadership, and all the work that they've done at Southwestern. I don't know how you feel, Jeffrey, but I just feel like this was such an enriching episode with Rob and Brian.
As somebody who has been through both being a teacher, an educator, a district level administrator, it is amazing to watch a school district such as this one come up with a plan, fulfill a plan, work that plan, and now you're seeing everything that happens when that plan is put together. I got to tell you, Laura, I'm looking forward to next week when we see part 2 of that episode. Tell us a little bit about what we're in for in our next episode.
You're just going to hear more from Rob and Brian about their actual implementation. I so appreciate that they really started with kind of looking at systems and structures and getting those in place. Now we're going to hear a little bit more about the implementation itself, a little more about 95% Group Phonics Core program, which they use across the district in K through 5, and why that's so important to have those foundational skills and those word study skills go across K-5. So lots to look forward to. And we'll also hear from them about, their words of wisdom and advice for other leaders that want to tackle literacy transformation.
Laura, I'm looking forward to that episode. And of course, all of our archives can be found over at teachercast.net/95% group. And if you're looking for other great episodes, you can head on over to teachercast.net/podcast, hit that like and subscribe button. And thank you guys one more time for making TeacherCast part of your professional development network. So on behalf of Laura and everybody here on TeacherCast, my name is Jeff Bradbury, reminding you guys to keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students.